Hello everyone, my name is Rick van Bruggen from Neotechnology, and here I am recording another podcast session for the Neo4j Graphistania podcast. And tonight I'm joined by someone from the beautiful Midwest in the USA. I've got Dustin Cote from Decorah, Iowa on the Skype call. Hi Dustin, how are you?
Hi, Rick. I'm doing great. How are you?
Yeah, very, very good. Thank you for joining me. It's always great to have people from different parts of the world on this podcast. I've read some of your work in the community and on the GraphGists, Dustin, but most of our listeners probably haven't yet. So, do you mind introducing yourself to us and telling us who you are, what do you do, and what's your relationship to the wonderful world of graphs?
All right. My name is Dustin Cote. I currently live in the northeast corner of Iowa in a small rural town by choice. And I work for Luther College. It's a small private college. And just started last year. And prior to that, I was working at the University of Wisconsin-Madison and worked there for 7 years as a PeopleSoft programmer analyst with emphasis in database design. And before that, I was a data warehouse administrator, and before that, I was doing stuff with databases, and before that, I was learning how to program in 7th grade. So I've been around a while, well seasoned, as they say, and that's what I'm working on. I work on mainly because of my experience with ERP systems. Seems like no one wants to work on old technology, and so there's always a niche for that.
Well, the world would stop turning without old technology, I think. So
it would, believe it or not. Yep.
Yeah, it would absolutely do. But Dustin, what's your relationship to Neo4j and graph databases then? How did you get into that?
Well, very recently there was a competition for GraphGist on Neo4j, and I thought, what a great way for me to finally finish one of my project ideas. It had a deadline, and basically the only thing I needed to finish a project. And so I put together a conference data model because I was going to a conference and I wanted to know different things from the booklet they gave you, but because it's in a certain order, you can't find out certain things. So I knew that a graph database would be the perfect way to query on different angles and different ways of looking at your data. But before that, I would say back in 2008, when one of our companies moved and I was worried about competing against 25 Java developers unleashed to the town for jobs, I went back to school. And even though it turned out not to be an issue being reemployed, I continued to go back to school to get my master's. And it was then that I was doing a research paper. And one of the papers I was doing was to debunk overhyped technologies. And one of them was the semantic web. I heard of the Web 3.0 and thought to myself that this has been overhyped. I've heard about it for years and haven't seen anything about it. So while researching it, I realized that this is exactly what I had been looking for to solve so many of my own database projects. For example, I had some projects where I was saving disparate data. So, for instance, when you save music, MP3s or songs, it's usually saved as artist, album, and song name. Well, if you talk to classical music enthusiasts, they care about orchestras and maybe the conductor or the original composer. They look at different things, but it's the same item almost, and you still have to store it. And, by the time I was done designing all the different kinds of genres, there was just no database for relational databases that could handle it well. And when I looked into semantic web, I realized that this was the solution. And back then, there was a NoSQL movement. I would say semantic web is, since it saves as tuples or triples, I believe it's based on graph database, a little more formal perhaps. And so that my so all the uses I found for semantic web, I also find useful for Neo4j. And at the time when I was choosing which graph database to use, Neo4j was the one that I had heard the most. It had the best reviews at the time. And so I decided to spend the little time I had with, raising 2 kids to learn a new technology. And so that's why I picked Neo4j.
Super interesting, yeah. Well, I mean, it's very much related technology, right? And we could talk for more than what we have in this podcast about the differences between semantic web databases and Neo4j, because they are quite different. But
okay,
we'll take that offline.
Sure.
but they are different but related technologies, as I would say. So what did you like about the graph database then? You know, what problems was it solving for you? Why was it such a good fit for some of the things that you had found problematic in other databases?
Well, one of the things I've always liked is how you can make non-obvious connections. So you might have two different graph sets that are unconnected at the moment, but sometime in the future, if you're still collecting data, you might join two nodes together, and then suddenly your same query would return different results, and in fact, maybe solve a problem. I think one of the examples I saw long ago was perhaps, besides the NSA and CIA kind of examples, would be different language authors. They might have a different name in one language than another, and you might be following him, and then you suddenly make the connection and realize they have all this other body of work. So I like those kind of solutions that the graph database is continuously growing and making connections for you.
Yeah, like inferring new paths between different parts of the graph. Is that what I'm hearing?
Well spoken. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, well, I mean that is that's one of the examples that I always give. You know, it's like the pathfinding, right? I've got these two things, and how are they connected to each other? And show me those connections. I mean, whether you're talking about a beer data set or a social network or a recommendation engine, that's one of the most powerful use cases. I think those hidden connections, as you call them. Very, very cool.
Right, and with database design, when you're working in a large company, you have to spend so much time ahead of time designing things, and then once it's approved, and then once it's implemented, you know, many months or years can go by, and once it's done, you pretty much nail in the coffin, and you really don't want to change it again because you don't know what you might change. With graph databases, sometimes you can add a whole new set of features or properties, and it won't affect the past data you had. It'll actually just enrich the data you have in your new applications that can leverage it.
I think
that's very powerful.
That's such a powerful point that you're making there, and I think it's also why there's like a perfect storm now for graph databases because of the whole agile development paradigm as well. You know, people don't develop waterfall systems anymore. You know, they try to take a much more leaner approach to software development, and you know, you don't know what you don't know, right? When you're developing a new system, so
that's right.
It's a great fit for that, I think, as well. Yeah. So Dustin, where do you think this is going? You know, where do you personally want to take this? And you know, I'll put some of the links to your work on the blog post with this podcast recording. But where do you see it going? You know, what do you want to do with it? Where do you see the industry taking it?
Well, where I personally want to take it is perhaps more projects that can help categorize interests. So I've been kind of an internal description as my industry, so I might be interested in homesteading or something. And there are podcasts out there that are in the 2,000 episode range, and it would be great to be able to categorize those and find exactly what you're looking for, maybe even the author or the interviewee. You know, someday maybe you'll have 2,000 interviews here.
Oh my God!
You never know how you can tie all those people together. They have, you know, people bring such great resources from their work, and there's just, you know, like Hack the Planet. It's more like Categorize the Planet. I think graph database is good for that. As far as the world future, I think this is a kind of a tool that's generic enough and powerful enough that someone out there that doesn't even know anything about this yet is going to come up with an idea, use your project and platform, and come up with something new. It's just that kind of technology that you're creating, and it's really going to be anyone's imagination, really. Something that we haven't even thought of yet.
Like a platform for innovation, basically, like doing new
Absolutely
stuff. Yeah. Well, super well. Yeah, I really like that perspective. I really do, and I think, you know, like for example, in the past couple of months, what we've seen at Neo4j, you know, when some of the Panama Papers research was published and stuff like that, you know, that was for us, that was like fantastic validation, you know. That would never have happened 10 years ago, and now it's happening because of, you know, a small contribution that we're making, I guess. So
absolutely, and I like your ramp-up time to test out Neo4j with that web interface you have, where you can just start importing right away.
Mm-hmm.
It's a great tool.
Very cool. Very nice. Thank you, Dustin, for spending the time with me on this recording. As you know, I like to keep these things short and snappy and digestible for everyone. We'll put some of the links to your work with the transcription. But for now, I'm going to thank you very much for coming online, and I hope to meet you face to face at some point.
It's my pleasure, and keep up the good work.
Thank you so much. Have a
Thank
nice
you.
Bye.
Bye.